Welcome back. Now, the South African Reserve Bank has launched a corporation for deposit insurance. This in a bid to safeguard bank depositors via this newly established deposit insurance scheme, which provides cover for as much as 100,000 Rand for qualifying depositors should the bank fail. And joining us with more detail is Sabihah Mohamed, CEO of the Corporation for Deposit Insurance. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us in studio, Sabihah. Now, how long has this been in the works, and really what has necessitated this extra layer of protection?
So with the global financial crisis which happened in 2008, 2009, there was a finding that many of the resolution options for when a bank failed did not consider necessarily the deposit insurance aspects thereof. So the Financial Stability Board issued guidance to G20 countries specifically about how they can strengthen their financial sector safety net to look at the deposit insurance being privately funded and being in place for when a bank has failed.
I'm keen to actually then find out about CODI, is that what we call it? Yes, absolutely, the Corporation for Deposit Insurance here. How does it work, Sabihah? How is it capitalized? How do the governance structures work? How do we make sure that it is indeed a foolproof mechanism?
So the Corporation for Deposit Insurance, or CODI, like we call it, it is a subsidiary of the South African Reserve Bank. It has a mandate of establishing a deposit insurance fund, which CODI can then use to protect the covered deposits of a bank that has failed. So if we look at what is a qualifying depositor, it will be an individual or a non-financial business. We also specify which products would be covered. So it's your typical deposit products, a savings account, a check account, a transactional account, as well as fixed and notice deposits. And we protect these depositors up to 100,000 per qualifying depositor per bank. So if we look at the governance, we have an independent board of directors. The membership is specified in law. We also have an investment committee that will guide the investment of the deposit insurance fund, which CODI will then use to protect the depositors.
Yeah, and actually just looking at the banks that do have to be registered, do all of them have to be registered, and would there be valid reasons for an exemption there?
So all banks will be registered with the Prudential Authority, and they will automatically become a member of CODI.
Okay.
It's not optional, it's by law automatic. So any newly established banks will become a member of CODI the moment that they become a registered bank with the Prudential Authority. So it's across all the banks that are registered, it's not optional.
I'm also ask if we're only covering banks at this point, not fintechs, no other kinds of businesses that could be deposit taking in nature, Sabihah.
So as a first step, we will be focusing on banks specifically because of the role that they play in the economy. In future, and this is a few years down the line, there will be additional considerations for expanding the scope of coverage, the membership of CODI, but that will take a couple of years to build into this framework.
Sabihah, in terms of benefits, there's also a narrative that this will also provide a better, more competitive environment for the banks. Talk to us about the mechanics there.
So I think the good thing about CODI is that all qualifying depositors at any of the banks, and many people don't know, but there are 35 banks in South Africa. So whether you are banking at a small bank or large bank, an old bank or new bank, the qualifying depositors will be protected to the same extent. So in the past, the public was maybe a little reluctant to bank with new banks or with smaller banks because they were concerned about the safety of their money. But with CODI in place, your money is protected to the same extent at any of these banks. In terms of the member banks that we have, we've got cooperative banks, mutual banks, commercial banks, and then the local branches of foreign banks.
So let's talk about the 100,000 Rand here, how we arrived at this amount, but also if there might be, room in future to increase it, also depending on how much a deposit I have. I'm not sure what the criteria would be, but looking at that specific amount. So
we've done a couple of surveys over the past 10 years. And in terms of the last survey we did, which was in 2021, we found that 85% of the depositors in South Africa had less than 10,000 Rand in the bank. But then we thought, let's up the coverage limit, that's what we call the 100,000 to 100,000. And at that level, 98% of the qualifying depositors will be fully covered. So that means that 98% of those depositors that qualify have less than 100,000 Rand in the bank.
Sabihah, I understand that you say that conversations started being had after the 2008 global financial crisis, but there have been other crises, smaller ones, including the US banking crisis last year. And I'm wondering, have you incorporated some of the lessons from that, and really that maybe also provided a sense of urgency for this to come online at this point?
I think one must bear in mind that the work on establishing a deposit insurance scheme for South Africa has taken about 10 years, so it's not a new development. We do learn from lessons in other countries whenever a bank fails, and we try to incorporate it. But as you know, with the United States issue, they're still busy doing research to see what exactly should be different. So in the deposit insurance world, we have the International Association of Deposit Insurers that give guidance in terms of the best practice for deposit insurers, and we follow that closely. So at the moment, they're busy revising their core principles. And we will then obviously look at what the impact on South Africa and on Cody specifically would be.
I also want to maybe also iron this out for viewers that could be at home, wondering if there's anything they have to do now, to make sure that they are covered by a Cody. I can imagine, anything that might emerge where somebody might think they have to pay a fee of the course. Is there anything like that, Sabihah?
No, so the good news is that Cody does not require anyone to register with it. If you have an account in a qualifying product at one of our member banks and you're a qualifying depositor, the protection is automatic. I would just ask that depositors always keep their contact details updated at banks, because if anything were to happen to the bank, that's the types of information that we would need. But there's nothing that the depositor would have to do. Depositors also don't make any direct payments to Cody. The banks will be making contributions to Cody. We don't know how they will pass the cost on to the customer. We've done everything in our power to make sure that our funding obligations on the banks are as limited as we could. And we will also be working with the Financial Sector Conduct Authority just to monitor if at all, an increase in banking fees because of the implementation of a deposit insurance scheme.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that and for your insights on this very, very important conversation, Sabihah. That was Sabihah Mohamed, CEO of the Corporation for Deposit Insurance.